Today I'm going to walk you through the process of rough sanding your legs for your cricket table and rounding over the edges on the router table, and finally doing your finish sanding on all three legs so that you can prepare them for being glued together in their triangle shaped base. So first off, we're going to take our legs and we're going to scrape all the glue off and make sure that all of these beads are removed so it doesn't wear out the belt on the wide belt sander. So there's one done. Looks like all of my top surfaces are clean. It's just the backs on mine that I need to check. Looks pretty good. A little bit on this one. Alright, now that my glue joints are clean, I'm going to take my legs over to the wide belt sander and I'll get that set up, and I'll start taking these down to finish thickness next. Here at the wide belt sander, I've got it set up in terms of its thickness. It's ready to take my legs in and get them rough sanded down to 3/4 of an inch thick. Just keep in mind the process. Use the switch here, click it to the close side. It's just a really quick flip of your wrist, and you're going to do that multiple times until you sand everything down to 3/4 of an inch thick. When you go to do your measuring, make sure that you don't use the tongue of your tape. Bury the one and measure from the 1 inch mark. This is going to be far more accurate than using the tongue of your tape. So I'm going to fire up the dust collector because the wide belt sander does not operate without it. So I'm going to turn on the dust collector, and then I'll fire up the wide belt sander. So I'm going to walk over and get that turned on now. This is going to be my 5th pass. So after my 4th, I want to double check and see what progress I've made. I'm going to start checking my thickness after every pass, just so I can sneak up on the finished thickness. So I double check. That was another 2 passes, and it's coming down nicely. When I go to measure it, I'm burying the one, and that looks perfect. 3/4 thick. When you're done, hit the top 3 red buttons. Don't hit the big red one, that's the emergency stop. Only use that in the case of an emergency. Your next step in processing your cricket table legs is to round over the corners in this section here and down in this bottom section here on both faces. So we're here at the router table. This is the router that's right next to the Powermatic drill press, and this is the one that is set up for making this cut. All you're doing is you're rounding over the corners with a 1/4 inch radius roundover bit. It is very simple to do. there's just a couple things that you need to be aware of. You don't ever want your hands to be on the inside, or your fingers, excuse me, you don't want your fingers to be on the inside of the edges that you're cutting. So you want to have your hands on the outside face, and maybe if you had to, you could have your fingers extending over the edges where your cutting is not occurring. So when you start to do this bottom section, don't have your fingers overextending the edge of where you're trying to cut. It is really dangerous if you're not paying attention. It will give you a little bit of a manicure, and this one is not going to be very good or very well done. So for this process, I am going to be using my dust mask and my hearing protection because the router table is really dusty and it's really loud. For this router, the switch is right here in the front. I don't think the camera is angled far enough down, but it is here in the front. So just reach underneath the table here and turn it on and start doing all of your roundovers. I've got my table legs, the other two that I'm not working with, they're just resting up against the base of the shaper off to my right, and I'll get this thing going here. First I've got to mask up and get my earplugs in. Here we go. When you're doing your routing, you want to make sure that as soon as you get one of these corners, immediately hit it and then keep going. The worst thing you can do is have the router bit stall in a corner before moving on. So what I'm talking about is as soon as I get that corner right there, I continue on. I don't want to stall and then move. If you do stall, sometimes you have a tendency to get burn marks in your corners. Burn marks you can get them out, but they are a little bit of a pain. They're a little bit more extra work. So when you are using the router table, make sure that as you're coming around and coming into the corners, don't stop, don't stall. Go and hit it and keep going. Okay, this one is done, so I've got the inside corners in both of these areas all rounded over, and they look really good. So I've got two more to go. Something that's really good to have when you're doing this is one of these bench brooms so you can clean off the deck in between cuts. Here we go. When you're done, just really quickly use a bench broom and clean off the top. I have my 3 legs that are ready for finish sanding now. So I'm going to go set up over at one of the workbenches. I'm going to grab a random orbital sander, and you're probably going to need to get another sanding disc for me, another 5-inch sanding disc, so that you can finish sand the faces of both sides of your legs. So I'm going to go over and set up for that next. I'm here at the workbench, and I am set up to be able to do the finish sanding on the faces and the roundovers of my legs. The very first thing you're going to want to do is pick up a glue scraper, and as you start to sand, you're going to notice that there might be some little dried bits of glue. Those little dried bits of glue can actually damage the face that's touching the workbench. So if you just rub your hand over it, and if you feel a high spot, something that might be sticking out, just like that. That was a little bit of glue. You want to knock all of those down. And I'm getting a pretty good size, at least, well, just a little bit over half of the width of the bench. And I'm not going the full depth of it, but I'm getting a pretty good area, just because as you sand, the leg is going to move, and you don't want to risk the chance of running over a dried bit of glue. Again, if you do that, it will damage that face. It'll scratch it, dent it, ding it, and then you just have to re-sand what you've already sanded. So it's a really good idea to start with a glue scraper and just get all of the nasty stuff off of the workbench. You're going to want to grab a random orbital sander, and regardless of what might be on there, don't use it. You want to get a fresh disc. Start off with a fresh disc, because you will be using this entire thing up. It's a pretty big job to sand all of these out, so you want to make sure you get a brand new sanding disc before you get going on sanding any of your legs. I am going to need to use my dust mask and my hearing protection, only because this does get really, really dusty, and this is when the progress of sanding is really important, so you want to protect your lungs. I'm going to start with the hose. Let it click into place, and then connect it as usual. Just pull back on the sleeve and connect it onto the part of your sander, and just start going from there. Like I said, I've got my dust mask on that I'm going to wear because this is going to get pretty dusty. So, with my dust mask on, I can go ahead and start. Now, when you are using the sander, the sanding pad is 5 inches wide, my rails are 2.5, and my stiles are 2. When you are using the sander, it is really important to make what are called overlapping passes. So I might be going up and back like this, but then I'm going to shift it slightly, and I'm going to go up and back as well. Then I'll come back and go up and back, just go back and forth. Another method is just to go roundabout. You could do a circular motion and do it that way. But the biggest thing with this is making overlapping passes. Don't just go back and forth, because the pressure is going to be different as you move it. It's going to be much more effective and efficient with your sanding. So you want to make sure you do that kind of action with your rails and with your stiles. So here we go. I'm going to start down here on this bottom one. So you're probably thinking, what's the difference between rough sanding and finished sanding? Well, rough sanding, you're more or less using a very rough, coarse grit in order to take the material down. The scratches are very large, very noticeable, and my finished sanding, I'm using a little bit finer grit, and when I'm sanding, I'm taking out all of what are called the cross-grain scratches. As you put the legs in the sander, they go in this direction. The sanding is happening in this direction, the same direction as you're feeding the legs into the sander. Across the grain of your rails, you are going to have what are called cross-grain scratches. That's ultimately what we are trying to remove from the faces of your stiles and rails. Now, the stiles don't get cross-grain scratches in them because of the grain direction of the wood. But on the rails, you are having to remove those cross-grain scratches. You're sanding everything evenly. I don't know if you were noticing, but I was sanding everything evenly, the exact same. I wasn't focusing on the rails more than the stiles. But you do have to sand all of it. What I'm trying to remove are those cross-grained scratches, and from what I can see on my rails, they are looking really good. So I'm going to grab the camera and I'm going to set it up, and I'm going to try and see if I can even do this. I've honestly never tried this. But if you get it in the right light, you might, oh, right there, you can see the white cross-grain scratches going laterally across the grain. If you get it in the right light, you can see them. The grain is going this direction. The cross-grain scratches are going across the grain. You can kind of see them in that lighting. Now, I do have a light right above my head, and that's kind of important. If you're over here where we were, if you were right over here, then if you get it in the right light, you might be able to see it, but more than likely not. So it does help to just go right over here, step off to the side there with the lighting bar right above your head. Okay, so I'm going to set up, and I'm going to do that side that I just showed you. The side that I just sanded, there are no cross-grain scratches. The side that I got some video of is with the cross-grain scratches. So I'm going to start down here again. I'm going to step over here, and I'm just going to take the light from up above, and I'm moving it around just to make sure that I have all of the cross-grain scratches out. And it looks really good. I have no issues with what I'm seeing. Now, when it comes to your roundovers, getting the roundovers is just as important as getting the face. And I'm going to try and get a close-up of this as well. And probably have to get in the right light. Sorry if I'm making you seasick. But if you look at this, there is a roundover, you've got your edge, but there is a very hard, distinct line right here. That hard line has to go away. We want the face and the edge to flow together. We don't want to see any hard lines. Hard lines are very distracting, and they don't look very good once they are finished. You want to see no difference from edge to face. You want to get rid of that hard line, okay? So it's really simple to do it, but I'm not going to lie, it's kind of a pain. So just kind of follow along with me. You're going to develop your own method of doing this, and I'm just going to show you what I do. That's really just a great starting point. So I always start at the bottom. This is the easy part to do, mostly because all of this is kind of open. It's not enclosed on four sides right here. So I'm going to start right here. I start on the face, and then I go to the edge. I have a 90-degree turn. So I'm going to come down and do that, and I'm going to come all the way back and do the same thing, and then I'm done. If you do any more sanding than that, it's overkill. It's not necessary. You just want to come down and go back and then be done with it. Okay, it looks something like this. This one is a little bit tricky because I'm not left-handed. Yeah, not bad. And then in order to get this, the top edge of the bottom rail, I do it something like this. Huh. Be careful with your hands getting it that close. When this disc is out flat, it can turn into a meat slicer. It can slice you open if it's going like this, if it's going really fast. It will cut you open, so you do have to pay attention. That is looking really good. Now I'm going to come to this side. This is where it gets a little bit funky and weird. So if you have any other way that you might want to do it, go ahead and try it. Okay, I've gone down and back with my roundovers on everything on this face. Now I'm going to flip it over and I'm going to do the exact same thing on the other side. Whatever you do on one side, you've got to do on the other because we're trying to look for consistency. So here we go. Okay, so I've got my roundovers done. Now just to make the surface consistent again, because we were going down and back and then we came and did the roundover. So I have those roundover hit marks every time. I want to make it consistent again. So I'm just going to quickly go over the faces one more time. Don't do it too much because you're going to get those hard lines back again, and we just got rid of them. And that looks good. No more hard lines. I've got nice, consistent, round surfaces from the edge to the face. I'm going to blow this off and show you one more time. Okay. I don't know if this is the same edge, but they were all more or less the same. So if you look at this carefully, you don't see any more hard edge. The face rolls over and blends right into the edge. Another thing that you may want to look at is your edges on the inside. So all of your inside edges all the way around, and down here all the way around as well. Check to make sure that your edges are sanded as well. If you have burn marks, if you have saw marks, this is the only time that you're going to have really to get it out easily. Once you have your table glued up into a triangle as a base, that's when it gets a little bit more difficult to do your sanding. It's not impossible, but it is a little bit more difficult. So that's pretty much it on the finished sanding of your legs. You're just going to go over and do all of your legs the exact same way. And once you're done, we're going to move on to the next step. And that next step entails preparing it to get glued into your base. So that's going to be on your next video.